Okay. Did you hear any of that? The answer is no. The doctor went away. There's been a number of setbacks with it. And so, but she did kayaking with some special needs, adaptive adventures, and she had a smile all over her face with she was kayaking. So she's rising above the physical.
Has she tried Taco Bell?
I'm not sure Taco Bell is. Okay. Yeah.
All right. All right, let me see if I can get the lesson up. We've had our challenges this morning on this internet. But thanks, Chris. Okay, there we go. All right. Pat, Greg, thank you for being here. We're a crazy bunch here, so we try to keep it. We try to keep in touch with the folks that are either traveling or sick or homebound or that, because that's why we've been doing it ever since COVID. So we been doing the Zoom thing. That's why we do it this way. So we are continuing in our study of 2 Timothy, and we're in chapter 3 now, starting with that. And we'll just look at the first 9 verses. And this section is talking about warnings of apostasy in the first 9 verses, and then next week in 10 through 17 is more ways to dealing with the apostasy, and so that's where we are. You look at some questions. So when you think about warnings of apostasy in the end days or perilous times coming in the end days, you're thinking of questions like, what are the last days? Are we in the last days? What does perilous times, what does that mean? And how do we recognize the danger, and how do we avoid the danger, and how can we be victorious in that? And all those kind of questions really we look at in this chapter. And so we'll kind of go through that. So looking at this section of these 9 verses, we had 4 parts of it. Is the first verse is perilous times in the last days. And then we talk about what is the human condition? What is humanity like during the last days? And that's verses 2 through 5. And then what kind of strategies are these corrupt people, these people that are caught up in the apostasies? What's their strategies during this time? And then Paul gives an example in verses 8 and 9 of that type of corruption. So what I thought I would do this morning, I normally use the New King James as to what I study from, and we'll use that as we look at the verses. But I went ahead and looked at this section in the Message. There's in a contemporary, and I'll read it from the Message, but we'll study it from the New King James. But anyway, so listen to this. It says, "Don't be naive. There are difficult times ahead. As the end approaches, people are going to be self-absorbed, money hungry, self-promoting, stuck up, profane, contemptuous of parents, crude, coarse, dog eat dog, unbending, slanderers, impulsively wild, savage, cynical, treacherous, ruthless, bloated windbags, addicted to lust, allergic to God. They'll make a show of religion, but behind the scenes, they're animals. Stay clear of these people. These are the kind of people who smooth talk themselves into the homes of unstable and needy women and take advantage of them. Women who, depressed by their sinfulness, take up with every new religious fad that calls itself truth. They get exploited every time and never really learn. These men are like those Egyptian frauds, Jannes and Jambres, who challenged Moses. They were rejects from the faith, twisted in their thinking, defying truth itself. But nothing will come of these latest impostors. Everyone will see through them, just as people saw through that Egyptian hoax. Anyway, I thought that was just kind of the way it is more impactful, maybe, in what we look at. So look at that first verse. It says, "But know this, that in the last days perilous times will come." So what are the last days? I mean, you kind of get two different ideas here on the last days. One is that it is the days immediately prior to the return of Christ. These last days before the return, certainly it means that. But it also covers the period all the time way back from Pentecost, when Christ had just left, up until today. This whole period of time, the church age, is also referred to as the last times. So you look at it either both ways. Certainly, the things that Paul's talking about here are going to be increasing as you get closer to that return of Christ. But in some of the authors and commentators will point out that every generation since Pentecost has been looking for the return of Christ. And there have been reasons as they looked around the world around them at those days, and as we look around the world in our days, there are reasons to think that these are the last days. And certainly God would want us to be ready, every generation to be ready for his return. That could be at any time. So yes, we are in the last days. I think either way you look at it, either it is the long period of time between the day Christ ascended until he returns, that period of time, certainly. But also, I'm thinking that it sure seems like we're awful close to that period when Christ does return. One of the things, and then he talks about, it says perilous times, and the word perilous is interesting, and it refers to the raging sea, or a wild animal. Or you can picture just a wild animal, a rabid animal that just is crazy. And this same term is used in Matthew 16 when Jesus and disciples encountered the demoniac, and it says when he came out, and it says that you can't pass that way because he was so fierce and wild that when he came out, he was in the tombs and he was raging, he was breaking the chains that he is, and he was just a wild animal. That term perilous is used in that verse as well. So that is what the perilous times. You can picture that, and I talking about raging animals. You've seen some videos of some of these demonstrations of the people that are involved in there, and they some of them even say they're animals. I'm an animal. I mean, it's wild, and it sure seems like it's there. So this next section, verses 2 through 5. What I'd like to, as we go through the different characteristics of the last times here, is think in terms of opposites. Everything it says here, we should try to be the opposite, and we should examine ourselves as we look at these words. So not so that we are looking at other people and say, looking how bad things are here or how bad they are, but rather think of it in terms of how I need to improve. Am I showing characteristics here that I don't want to show or I shouldn't show? But second, look at verse 2. For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying its power, and from such people turn away. So the first one is lovers of themselves. And I kind of look at, sometimes you could describe our age as the selfie generation. It, and you see people, and you look around, especially if you're in a tourist thing, and everybody is taking pictures of themselves. And they're just loving themselves and taking pictures of it. We have a thing where everybody's a winner. Everybody gets a participation trophy. The children and adults and we're all taught that self-esteem is the thing. We need to have good self-esteem. We need to love ourselves. We don't need to be told to love ourselves. We do that naturally. That's certainly something that we can do quite well usually. We don't need to be taught to hate ourselves either. But in Romans 12:3, it says, I say, through the grace given me, everyone who is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought, but to think soberly as God has dealt to each one a measure of faith. So we, rather than be lovers of ourselves or haters of ourselves, we should be looking at ourselves as we really are. We are sinners saved by grace. We are certainly sinners, but we are saved by grace. And what we are in Christ is what we are, but not to think of ourselves in an unnatural, loving way. Lovers of money, and this is nothing new. I have a story. There's a story about Brenda Blackman. So she was having some success, and she was teaching. I'll read the story here. She was teaching a course titled "How to Marry Money." The course attempts to show men and women how to marry rich. It costs $39 a person for the course. In the course, Blackman offers helpful hints, such as how to search through your prospective mate's checkbooks, to study their deposits and assess their income levels. She built her students' confidence by leading them in a chant several times through the lecture. I want to be rich. I deserve to be rich. I am rich. I was born to be rich. In one class, Blackman was asked by a woman if it was all right to settle for a man whose income was about $100,000 a year. She said, no way. What if he was perfect in every other way? Well, if he was in his peak earning years and was maxed out at 100,000, forget it, Blackman said. When someone else asked her about the place of love in such relationships, Blackman said that the finding a mate with that much money is the hard part. Learning to love that person is easy by comparison. How could you not love someone who is doing all these wonderful things for you? And by the way, Blackman was single as she was teaching. $39 a person for the class. I don't know. Anyways, 1 Timothy 6:10, of course, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And some people craving money have wandered from the true faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows. So we got to be careful about it. Money can trip us up, and we can't be lovers of money. This one, from boasters, proud, and blasphemers. This one is, I am the most important person. You don't matter. God doesn't matter. It's just me. I'm the only one that mattered. When we were in Italy, there was a little brochure that somebody gave us. It was called The Italian Driver. And just learning how to drive when you're in Italy, when we were living in Italy. Anyway, it started out with, you get up in the morning and you stand in front of the mirror and say, I am the only driver. Mine is the only car. Pedestrians don't count. Anyway, but this boasting, proud, blaspheme. I mean, we just see it. We just see it. There's this thing. There's a story of the guy that went to the flight was canceled. They were at the airport and the flight was canceled. And a guy goes up to the ticket counter because everybody had to get reticketed, and there was a long line at the counter, and there was just one attendant there working the counter. This guy jumps the line, goes in front of everybody up, slams his ticket on the counter, and he says, I have to be on this flight and I have to have a first class seat. And the attendant said, well, you'll have to wait until after I take care of all these other people. And he said, do you know who I am? And she did. She picked up the microphone and she says, ladies and gentlemen, I'm at the counter here. There's a gentleman here who doesn't know who he is. Could anybody help me help this gentleman find out who he is? Anyway, but we've all encountered people, and we all maybe have been guilty of this. We got to be careful about this, putting ourselves first. The disobedient of parents, and there is a breakdown of authority, and I don't know. I have, and we all here have this just unique perspective of time. Maybe so we don't know how we say that it looks that it's gone downhill since the 60s, and it probably has, but it may be older generations might say no, it was the 1920s, it really went downhill. But anyway, it does seem like that. And we even see court cases where children are divorcing their parents and they want to have other parents and silly stuff like that. Children disregarding their parents. Parents are not getting backed up by society in a lot of cases, where they may actually doing end runs around the parents and letting kids get medical procedures without even parental notification or approval. Anyway, and that disrespect spills over to our whole culture. But that's as a sign of the end times, of this whole period of time. Unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving. It's been ever since Genesis, ever since Cain and Abel, ever since Adam and Eve. Certainly seems more prevalent now. But that word, the unloving is without family love, is what that means. Without any what would be natural love that a parent would have or a sibling would have. And it manifests, it comes out in what we see in the child abuse and euthanasia and elder abuse and abortion, refusing to render aid. How many times have you seen a video on the news where somebody is in need of medical help or need of help or something, and everybody on the sidewalk just walk by, or they cross the other side of the street? This uncaring attitude, unforgiving, unloving, unholy, unthankful. Slanders. This is making big money. I mean, we look at politics. I mean, politics is all about slandering the other guy and tearing him down and creating false stories. But it isn't just politics. It's a lot of places in our society, even in the courtrooms, even in the government. Even in the government, we see that the lies and slanders are promoted by certain agencies of our own government. Sad to say. Without self-control. I had to find a picture of a kid in a shopping market. I mean, that's the classic, isn't it? I mean, a kid throwing a fit, a tantrum in the middle of a grocery store. Is that right? Yeah. Our daughter-in-law was in a store someplace, and I forget which grandchild it was. Pulled one of those attempted to. She jerked him up by the arm and paddled him good right there, right in the store, right then. Took care of it. He was fine after that. But she was worried that it was caught on camera, and family services is going to be showing up pretty soon. It's gonna. But anyway, this is without self-control. I want it now. I want it now. Don't get in my way. You can't stop me from having it. Don't get between me and what I want. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. But, yeah, Buddy has an excuse. A dog. Oh. Yeah, it's brutal. I mean, we are entertained by brutality, but it's not really. You think about the brutal gladiator games in Rome. Okay, certainly brutal. We've got cage matches and the like, and that people. We see mass shootings. We should see, and we are very good at inventing new ways to kill people faster and in greater numbers. Right, new weapons coming out all the time that we can, and entertained by the brutality. I mean, it's brutal times certainly. Despisers of good. You know, a lot of times I watch and I see attacks on Christianity or on the church that I'm thinking, really, why is the church being it? I mean, all the force of good that Christianity has been throughout these 2,000 years, the force of good, the change that has been brought about by Christianity, and yet being attacked as being evil. I mean, and it is so simple. Good life is despised. Um, protection of the unborn is demonized. So you have a pregnancy life center that's attacked. They're trying to save children, do good work. We see dangerous drugs being legalized, and or the lack of respect for the police and even firemen. Good societal boundaries are called evil because they are restricting what people want to do. They want to do their own thing. And so you can't make your rules. I mean, your rules, you can't tell me what I have to do. And even like I said, with our daughter-in-law and others, parental discipline is sometimes is called abuse. But we had an example this past week, I thought, and I wanted to see if I can get this to come up. Anybody hear about this? Did you may? So Harrison Butker gave a speech, a graduation speech this past weekend. And oh my goodness, has it stirred up a thing? Let me see. See if I can pop this up here.
Christians do that a lot. Their own people in the church and stuff. They say, well, he's not too good a Christian because look at the way he dresses, look at the way he walks. He's not as spiritual as I am, but I'm better. I should be on the top of the heap.
Yeah.
It's the way the world is.
Okay.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Thank you for watching. We start this evening with the disturbing stories from the world of professional sports. Kansas City Chiefs kicker Harrison Butker is facing the wrath of the National Football League. He recently delivered a commencement address at Benedictine College, a private Catholic school in Kansas. Now, in that speech, Butker encouraged women to embrace their vocation as homemakers. And that set off the heavy-set, magenta-haired feminist crowd.
I can tell you that my beautiful wife, Isabel, would be the first to say that her life truly started when she began living her vocation as a wife and as a mother. I'm on this stage today and able to be the man I am because I have a wife who leans into her vocation. But it cannot be overstated that all of my success is made possible because a girl I met in band class back in middle school would convert to the faith, become my wife, and embrace one of the most important titles of all, homemaker.
Anything controversial there, folks? I mean, it looks to me like a man who deeply loves his wife. We should all be celebrating that. Well, the Kansas City Chiefs kicker also blasted Gay Pride Month, and he condemned President Biden's stance on abortion. Watch this.
Our own nation is led by a man who publicly and proudly proclaims his Catholic faith, but at the same time is delusional enough to make the sign of the cross during a pro-abortion rally. He has been so vocal in his support for the murder of innocent babies that I'm sure to many people, it appears that you can be both Catholic and pro-choice.
All right, Butker also urged male graduates to be unapologetic in your masculinity. In other words, he holds to the core values of the Catholic Church and Christianity at large. Now, in response, the official social page of Kansas City doxed his personal information. Now he's facing a raging and seething mob of woke activists. More than 100,000 people have signed a petition calling for him to be fired. We demand accountability from our sports figures who should be role models, promoting respect for all people, regardless of their race, gender, identity, or sexual orientation. We call upon the Kansas City Chiefs management to dismiss Harrison Butker immediately for his inappropriate conduct. What inappropriate conduct? Well, the petition also addresses all sorts of isms and phobias. His comments were sexist and homophobic, anti-trans, anti-abortion, and racist. These dehumanizing remarks against LGBTQ plus individuals, attacks on abortion rights, and racial discrimination perpetuate division and undermine human rights. A little hissy fit there. Take a breath, folks. Well, Kansas City Commissioner Justice Horn writing this on social media. Harrison Butker doesn't represent Kansas City, nor has he ever. Kansas City has always been a place that welcomes, affirms, and embraces our LGBTQ plus community members. Now, Butker also ran afoul of the NFL's Diversity and Inclusion Department. Yes, they have one. They issued a statement saying that his views are not those of the NFL. Harrison Butker gave a speech in his personal capacity. His views are not those of the NFL as an organization. The NFL is steadfast in our commitment to inclusion, which only makes our league stronger. That's from Jonathan Bean, the Chief Diversity Inclusion Officer at the NFL. So look, the NFL has a very interesting definition of the word inclusive. Their definition does not include players who are pro-life, pro-family, or pro-Catholic. And by the way, if the NFL is so inclusive, why aren't there any female linebackers or quarterbacks in the league? Makes you wonder. The world would have you believe that Harrison Butker's views are outside of the mainstream. But I would contend that there are many more Americans who share his values. No doubt Harrison is facing persecution for his faith, but that faith will sustain him through the adversities of life. And no doubt he will persevere over the mob of godless, heathen, pronoun-confused agitators who are now demanding his head on a platter. So cling to your faith, Harrison. Cling to your faith.
Anyway. Let's see. I'll get back to my. So anyway, so we see it. That's an example of how good is being despised in our.
I think it is you.
Anyway, so looking at this thing here. Traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than God. So everything here is about self. Men are traitors because of self. They're headstrong because of self. They are haughty because of self, and lovers of pleasure because of self. Nothing is wrong. Nothing is taboo. You can break all the rules. You don't have to have any boundaries. You can't be inhibited by anything. Just find your own road. We are all hedonists is another way of saying it, living without boundaries. Just do it. Just do it. That's the attitude there. So again, what I'm wanting is we look at all these things, think about doing the opposite. We should do the opposite. Form of godliness, but denying its power. It's kind of like we have a salad bar religion where you can just pick and choose what it is. I like onions and lettuce. I want French dressing. You just pick what you want on it, on your religion. But you deny the power of godliness. The power we're talking about, that Paul's talking about, is the power of the faith to guide our lives, to change our lives, to make us more godly. what the power that people would like in their religion is the power to get what they want. If I want what I want. A religion that is what I want is one that I can just practice on Sunday, do what I want the rest of the time, and it's not going to be demanding anything on me. So we get the results like things, adulterous pastors, cheating church leaders, murderous parents, embezzlement from churches, uncontrolled and unaccountable, so-called God can't tell me what to do attitude. But so we get kind of this. So here's a little humor for you.
Welcome to First Trinity Unity Community Church of the United States. How can we feed you today?
Hi, I'd like a 25-minute sermon and some upbeat worship music, please. Nothing too crazy, though. And I don't like to stand until the very end.
Certainly. Please drive forward. Have a blessed day.
No standing until the end, right?
Of course not, sir. Here at FTU CCUSA, we get your order right the first time, every time, all the time, and on time until the end of time. Have a blessed day. Welcome to First Trinity Unity Community Church of the United States. How can we feed you today?
Who's teaching?
Pastor Wilkes.
No, I'm not so crazy about him.
Oh, I meant, Pastor Johnson, of course. Sorry for the mix-up.
That's more like it. Now look, I don't want any of that Old Testament business today. I want to focus on the New Testament.
Well, of course, sir. The Old Testament God is me.
I mean, he is a lot happier now, so let's focus on the present.
Certainly.
I want some creative illustrations. I want to laugh a little bit, but not too much. I want my communion crackers broken for me with 100% with 100% natural grape juice. I know that stuff last week was from a can. You think that's honoring to God?
No, sir. Of course not.
I didn't think so. And I want to feel encouraged and uplifted and affirmed this week. And look, I want some healing from my bunion. And I don't want to be challenged too much, just a little bit, okay? Because I'm challenged enough during work.
Certainly. This is a safe place. A happy place.
I'd be a lot happier if you had something in the 5th row or so.
Certainly.
That's what I'm talking about. Have a blessed day.
So do you think sometimes we want the salad bar religion? Anyway, so Paul, he gets the next verse here, and he says, be careful about the company you keep. Be careful of your role models, who you set up as role models and mentors. Turn away from people that are like all these that we went through. Turn away from them. In other words, do the opposite. For us to just do the opposite. I'd say run and don't look back. He talks about the strategy of them, and it isn't so much he's picking on the women. The women, he indicate had the time to listen to these ones that would creep into the house. And we need to be careful about what we let into our house, what we have on our television, who we bring into our house. It's men or women, really, and part of it is brought about by biblical ignorance. If we need to be mindful of the scriptures and aware and knowledgeable about them, so that we can refute and ignore the ones that are coming in and trying to lead us astray. The last example that he uses here is these two Egyptian magicians, and I didn't realize their names are not in the Bible anywhere. It's in tradition, but it's the two magicians that were performing the fake miracles when Moses was trying to free the Hebrews from slavery in Egypt. You remember the story where Moses threw down his staff and it became a snake, and the magicians came up, they threw down their staffs, it became snakes, but Moses' snake ate their snake. Well, they copied some of the other miracles as well. These two, Janus and Jambres, the frogs and the flies and so forth. But there was reached a point where they couldn't duplicate or simulate. And these guys were actually using the occult. They were so-called miracles. They were what's the word? I just went, what's that?
Magicians?
Well, magicians, but they were using occult powers. Say again? Pardon? Yes, it was power, satanic powers is what they were using. But there was a limit, and it says at a certain point, and it says, you've done enough. That's as far as you can go. And of course, Moses kept on to the final of the plagues where the firstborn was killed. But God is always in control. And there is occult satanic power out there that will do what we would consider to be supernatural miracles. But beware of those. And not to be afraid into the extent we always remember God is in control, and they are limited. They can only go so far. In verse 8, 9, it says, but they will progress no further. God has a stopping point. They cannot go past it in there. Anyway, so yeah, let my people go. Having a form of godliness, but denying its power, and from such people turn away. That's what I picked out as the takeaway verse for today. Any thoughts on these? I think whatever in these verses, think of the opposite, and that's what we try to do. Okay. Next week, we'll finish up chapter 3. And it's more strategies of how to deal with the apostasies. How can we face it? So we can suggest to Pastor Jeff, we can have a drive-up window here. What's that? Fine, yeah. Oh, where did I go? There you are. Okay. I was afraid I made you all disappear. Sorry about that. It's magic.
Now, if you
Okay.
have a drive-up window, be sure that let them know that if Sean's preaching, we want lunch.
Yes. Yeah. The guy, he says, who's preaching today? Sean is. Okay, I need lunch. Yeah, poor guy. He one long sermon in his life, and they never forget it. All right, let me close. Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for this morning, and thank you for your word. And Lord, as we look at these things, at signs of the end time, and surely it sure seems like the end times these signs are increasing. But Lord, help us just to be the salt and light in the world, and help us to be the influence that is opposite of all these things that are signs of the end times. Let's go with us now this week. Be with us at the worship service today. Pray for the vote that's coming up. We just thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right.
See the funny.
See y'all.
Trying to.